World leaders' obsession with achieving net zero is causing many of the economic crises that we are living through today. Convincing carbon-based life forms that carbon is their enemy was a masterstroke that is now being sold as settled science. Is the science settled though? There are thousands of scientists that disagree with that approved science. If you look in isolation at CO2 levels since the Industrial Revolution, then yes, there is an apparent correlation between rising temperatures and CO2 levels in our atmosphere. However, if you look at our climate across the last several million years, the picture looks quite different. CO2 levels have been many multiples higher on several occasions long before 1760. We had a medieval warm period, a Roman warm period, during which the level of CO2 in the atmosphere was 10 times higher. How did the CO2 level subsequently drop without human intervention? On both occasions, the UK was much warmer than it is currently. The Romans successfully grew grapes as far north as York. They wore light clothing in the UK, only leaving in 420 AD when our temperature dropped. Across the last 500 million years, atmospheric CO2 has been declining, and the very small upturn in the last 200 years is almost negligible across that time frame. What if CO2 is cyclical? What if sunspots are the actual climate influencer? Something unrelated to human activity has reduced atmospheric CO2 on multiple occasions in history. Many scientists believe that we are at the peak of the latest warm period and it is now stabilising before it begins to drop again. I would like the answers to several questions. Number one, define net zero. I suspect that it means different things to different people. Net zero doesn't mean zero. Net zero means clever accounting, offsetting CO2 to achieve a theoretical zero figure. Many companies are planning on planting trees to offset their emissions. The loophole word in the phrase is net. They are not pursuing gross zero, or what you might think would be zero man-made emissions of CO2. Question 2. Where are all these billions and trillions of trees going to be planted? We don't have the land mass for all the big businesses to do this simultaneously. Additionally, tree planting's a cop-out. Trees die, trees shed leaves, which rot, releasing, guess what? The UK claims to have proudly reduced its CO2 by 40% since the 1990s. That is complete nonsense. We have done no such thing. What we have done is to offshore a large percentage of our manufacturing to China and the Far East. Instead of producing products in regulated low emissions factories in the UK, we have the same products made in low regulation, high emissions, coal-powered Far East factories, which we then ship halfway around the world. How has this process helped the planet? If our government wants to be honest with us, it should count and report our consumption footprint, not our production footprint. We've done exactly the same thing with gas and oil. Instead of producing our own, we've cut back domestic supply as much as possible, importing from abroad instead. We ship coal from Australia and South Africa, shale gas from the USA and oil from the Middle East. Not only does this leave us exposed to market volatility such as we are seeing now, but our consumption CO2 is higher than it would be had we produced our own. Question 3. If we successfully cut man-made CO2 emissions to zero by 2050, how long will it take for the global temperature to stop rising? How long before it drops back to target? Question 4. What happens if and when the temperature doesn't drop as predicted? I'm personally deeply sceptical of scientific predictions. They are, without exception, almost always incorrect. They are just expert modelling, best guess predictions, if you will. Remember all the COVID doomsday predictions? Not one of them was even close to being accurate. We are destroying our economy and our way of life to follow those expert models. A model is a prediction, little more than a guess. It certainly isn't settled science as it is being sold to us. What will they make us do next when the climate doesn't respond to human intervention? Many scientists have alternate views that we are heading for a mini ice age and it is the cold and glaciation that we should be preparing for. We are, I'm sure, all in agreement that the climate is changing. It has changed for millions of years and will continue to do so. Sea levels have risen and fallen for millions of years. It is quite arrogant to think that we are clever enough or powerful enough to influence the climate on this rock as it spins through space. I understand that the current climate broadly suits us and our requirements, but I'm deeply sceptical of our ability to make any difference whatsoever. We are in danger of destroying everything that we hold dear in an attempt to pause the climate where we want it to be. A modern day global King-Canute, if you will. Rather than pursue a futile attempt to change the climate, wouldn't we be better employed adapting to our changing environment? They are, for example, planning a mission to Mars with a view to colonising it. We can't breathe on Mars, so we would need to live in a sealed environment on the surface or below ground. How is that a step forwards? Let's assume that we do destroy Earth and it becomes uninhabitable. How will moving billions of miles to a planet already less inhabitable going to help anyone? Surely if we do reach that point in time, then building a sealed environment on Earth would be easier, cheaper and actually achievable. My belief is that our efforts would be better spent cleaning up the pollution we've already caused, preventing plastics from entering our oceans, from entering our food chain. I'm all for clean fuels, zero emission vehicles, looking after our planet better, but there is no such thing as a zero emission anything. Where do the plastics come from to make electric vehicles? Where does the rubber for the tyres come from? Seat material is either petrochemical based or leather, and now the climate zealots want to ban cows. We're going to be left with just petrochemicals as the solution. We're attempting to change the mining of fossil fuels for the mining of lithium and cobalt. I defy any parent to take a look at cobalt being mined and then support the practice. It's all well and good to go and buy an electric car. The virtue signalling opportunities are huge. But if you only charge it using 100% solar, it will be 70,000 miles before it becomes carbon neutral. Will the battery still work efficiently or at all after 70,000 miles? Or will you need a replacement battery by then? The maths just doesn't add up. I admire the sentiment, but it just doesn't add up. Not only is there not enough of either of these two elements for the planet to switch to electric vehicles, but there isn't even enough for the UK to do so in isolation. Renewables might work as a future source of power if every home had a Tesla battery, or another brand, on the wall. Solar and wind farms could then charge the nation and we could use the energy when we needed it. Again, we don't have enough lithium or cobalt to make enough batteries to implement that strategy. Let's hope the backroom boffins are working hard on alternative batteries that are scalable, lighter, more efficient and recyclable. Our world is built on steel. Wind turbines are made of steel. Show me how you can make steel using wind or solar power. The only method of making steel requires coal. Show me where all our plastics are going to come from without fossil fuels. Plastics are used to make wind turbines. Let me be clear, I'm not a climate change denier. The climate's changing. Are humans smart enough to change the climate denier? We may as well decide to make the world spin the other way around, because we can't do that either. In Scotland, we've just destroyed millions of trees so that we can use the land for wind turbines. So we've got rid of CO2 absorbing trees and replaced them with steel and plastic wind turbines to provide a sporadic energy supply that we can't store until we need it. As I said, I'm all for preserving the planet, cleaning all of the rubbish and plastic from our oceans and working towards renewables. But isn't it time to be honest and admit that the technology isn't yet in place to do so? We need domestic fossil fuel energy production while we scale up our renewables into a cost-effective supply. Our government and opposition are married to net zero by 2050 at all costs. At your cost, not theirs. At the next election, vote for Reform UK, the only party that will put British taxpayers